All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, we would like to call Dr. Don Hughes to the stand.
All right, Dr. Hughes.
Again? Oh no. Please no. Fuck me. Oh God. I'm sorry. I don't like making
Thank you,
statements
Doctor.
like this.
Just a reminder that you're still under oath.
The way
okay?
she was talking was
Thank you.
sexist. I'm sorry. I said it.
And could you please just remind the jury who you are again?
Sure, I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. I am board certified in forensic psychology. I am the president-elect of the trauma division of the American Psychological Association, and I evaluated Amber Heard over 6 visits for approximately 29 hours.
On the Zoom
Why
call.
are you here today?
To offer rebuttal testimony to Shannon Curry's testimony of yesterday.
Okay. Now, Dr. Curry said you used improper methods. Would you agree with that?
No, I would not.
Why? Please explain.
As I testified to you all several weeks ago, I used a standard forensic procedure that is well established in our field. It is a multi-method, multi-hypothesis-driven procedure where you're looking at a variety of different details and tests and external data to arrive at an opinion, and you're looking at the consistency across that data. There are 3 sort of sets of tests that we use as forensic psychologists, and I think that's where it seems that Dr. Curry seems confused. We have forensic assessment instruments.
She's not confused.
Those are instruments that are very neatly tied to a legal criteria. Those are most notably done in a criminal court for competency. If someone has competency to stand trial, we have very clear measures.
And the other one is
that can
fluff,
track
and she
that
used the one that's
legal
fluff,
criteria.
and it doesn't count.
The
There we get
next
it.
level are forensically relevant instruments. And those instruments are not linked to a specific legal criteria, but they do have information that's germane to that finding. And that can be an example of a risk assessment measure and a malingering measure. So the malingering measure that I utilized was the MFAST, and that was the only malingering measure in this case. The third category are clinical assessment instruments, and those are instruments that are validated and well-researched and used in the clinical realm as we understand people's symptomatology and diagnostic and functional capacities. Those are things like the MMPI, the PAI, the CAPS, the TSI, because they are clinically relevant and they still give us very valuable information to individuals who are involved in a court case. And the reason that we do that and we use these clinical measures is because the majority of the people that we see are in a clinical realm. They're not in a courtroom. So they're well-validated and well-researched methods. What we also do is use a very different types of tests within that category. We use some checklists, some face-valid checklists. We use some tests that are those broadband personality inventories. We use structured clinical interviews. And then we look for the consistency across those data points.
We already know
and when
this.
we use different types of tests, it gives us information about the individual, how they go about these tests in these different modalities.
Now, Dr. Curry seemed to suggest that Amber Heard tested the most extreme category in all of these different tests. Is that accurate?
No.
Objection compound.
Not correct. It's only one of the
That
tests.
is not accurate. They were not on the checklist. I mean, people sometimes do. They go, all the time, this happens to me all the time, frequently.
Wait.
And that is not how she endorsed these tests. She endorsed them in a very moderate way, in a very nuanced way, describing her symptoms that I determined was accurate and reliable.
Wait, what?
Dr. Curry also suggested that Amber Heard was tested very, very high, 98 percentile, I think, on malingering and feigning. Could you speak to that, please?
Sure. So, I mean, she said a lot of things, so let's go through those tests. The first was the PAI, and that's that other broadband psychological
Objection
measure.
non-responsive.
I think it's very responsive.
Sustained.
Okay. Could you tell the jury about the PAI test that Dr. Curry?
She's downplaying the importance of the
Yes.
answers?
Thank you. So that's the broadband measure that has validity scales built into it that gives us indications about how the individual goes about the test. I told you last time that there was no evidence of malingering or exaggeration or feigning on that test. What Dr. Curry was talking about was this tendency to put your best foot forward to minimize faults on this PAI. That scale was right at the cusp. And then there are two other measures that we look at that to say, is this enough for an elevation for me to consider that as a serious response distortion, of which Dr. Curry was saying, and it was not. What was relevant on this test was there were elevations on anxiety, on affective anxiety, meaning anxiety,
So
tension,
who says
worry,
the other tests
on
didn't
traumatic
have the
stress,
same,
on hyperactivity,
I don't give a fuck
and
about these
on
answers.
affective instability.
About the first one.
Those were the 4 scales that were elevated on this test. The borderline scale was not elevated on this test. And this test,
Objection, Your Honor.
Specific-
May we approach?
Yes.
Okay. Anyways, so the one test that says yes, right? She's saying, oh, she could have answered like this and like that, and these are like inaccurate or whatever the fuck. But the other tests that say no, these are insanely accurate, to the point, massive mode, undeniable answers of the truth. I mean, come on, man. What says that the same level of nonchalance could have been applied to other tests if it was applied to the first one? I don't get it. How can you do that with absolute certainty? Isn't it just talking about, Chad, the same sort of test you get for like attention deficit or whatever? The little checkers that they give you? You're in a room waiting with nothing to do with your hands or feet. You tap your toes or tap your fingers. Never. Sometimes. All the time. Shit like that.
So Dr. Curry, let's move to the TSI-2. Dr. Curry testified about your findings on that. Did you agree with her testimony yesterday?
no,
Please
again,
describe why. Explain why.
what Dr. Curry went back to, which is this 98th percentile, which I told you in the manual. All you have to do is read the manual. It says specifically
Well,
that
they're
we
not
do
gonna read
not
it then.
use the percentile ranks for this test. That indicates to me that, Dr. Curry does not know the psychometric properties of this test, and then she then is therefore not qualified to interpret it. That score, the one that's elevated, which she's talking about, that percentile rank, has a raw score. Amber's raw score is a 10. The cutoff score is a 15. She's nowhere near that level of exaggerated symptoms where I can't further look at that test. Secondly, there are 3 scales out of maybe there's about 20, a little more on the TSI that were elevated. Intrusive experiences, that's when thoughts and memories of the trauma come into your mind when you don't want them. Defensive avoidance, sort of behavioral ways that we try to push out those memories and not think about them. And then relational avoidance, a way of having difficulty in interpersonal relationships. Those are all trauma-based symptoms, and those were elevated on this test.
Thank you. Dr. Hughes, the MFAS, Dr. Curry addressed that as well and had criticisms for your interpretations. Do you agree with that?
No.
Please explain to the
So the MFAST, as I told you last time, is a measure of malingering. It's the only measure of malingering that was done in this case. Dr. Curry did not independently administer a measure of malingering, and there are other ones that she could have done to augment her evaluation. And she kept saying something that MFAST is not for malingered PTSD. That's wrong on a couple of levels.
Oh, okay, thank you.
People who are going to malinger and feign don't only feign one diagnosis. They sometimes talk about all different symptoms that they have, and they
Sometimes.
exaggerate and they make themselves seem much worse than they are. So when you're doing an evaluation, you're giving a malingering measure to get a sense of how this person is responding to this evaluation. Now, what you do is you take those 3 tests that I talked to you about, the PAI, the TSI, and the MFAST, all with valid validity scales, you have greater confidence in your results. And that is in the literature, and that's literature that Dr. Curry cited in her report. That bolsters the methodology that I used. That in the study that had the PAI, the MFAST, and the TSI in the title of detecting feigned from bona fide PTSD.
All of that information through
Now,
fucking...
Dr. Curry also talked about the danger assessment
6 hours
scale
of
and
Zoom calls.
suggested that you had inappropriately interpreted that. Do you agree?
Thank you.
That's also incorrect,
Please describe for the jury.
which I told you last time. The danger assessment scale has statistically validated risk factors for serious or lethal domestic violence. Those risk factors exist whether we go forward, we're sitting with someone in an acute setting and assessing them
Tick-tock
right
clock.
now, or if we look backward and we look retrospectively about what factors may have been
30 hours,
present
sorry.
in a case that indicated
Surely.
severity. That instrument is used in what we call, there's called domestic fatality review boards. Those are boards after somebody has been killed, a homicide has occurred in a domestic situation. They look at these risk factors to see what was there and what could be done.
All right. Dr. Curry also criticized your administering of the CAPS 5. Do you agree with her criticisms?
I do not.
Will you please explain to the jury?
So the CAPS 5, as you all have heard multiple times, is a structured clinical interview in determining PTSD according to DSM-5 criteria. On this measure, Amber Heard scored in a moderate range. She did not over-exaggerate on this test. She could have said no, mild, moderate, severe, and extreme. All of hers were either 2s or 1s or 0s. None above that. So she's scoring in the moderate range, which still has functional impairments. I mean, we don't want someone to be having moderate PTSD, but that's not an exaggerated profile or exaggerated response style of someone who's answering an instrument.
Surely.
And the last of these Dr. Curry referred to was the PCL 5. Do you agree with her criticisms of your administration and interpretation of that?
No, so the PCL-5 is a checklist of symptoms of PTSD. It is, as she said, it is a face valid instrument. It means it's very clear about how you can endorse this.
When did
But
she
what
get?
the
When
person
did she
has
get
to
this
do is
treatment
say,
to this lady? What's the timeline?
Because
Because she had asked for it
And when you have face valid
modify
measures
it
with these other measures
and
that
manipulate
have
the results?
built-in sort of validity scales, you're sort of controlling for that response bias error. You're controlling for that individual to sort of over-exaggerate. But then what you do with that test, because this is, we're not just administering them like robots, is you go and you do a clinical assessment. And that's what I did. I took what she wrote, what she endorsed on that test in January of 2021, and I did a clinical assessment of those symptoms to see if they meet criteria
In 2021?
for PTSD. That is something we do clinically, and I do in my office all the time. And yes, she did meet PTSD from that in January 2021.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Curry said you misinterpreted her test results. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree that I agree that I interpreted them, that she misinterpreted them.
Okay. And please explain.
Yes. So I said that before. My stance on the MMPI and how she interpreted it is, I believe, wrong, and I think most.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right.
That's the issue we just addressed.
All right.
I don't.
If you want to approach.
Oh. Interesting. Okay. From how she's explaining it, because I don't mean to be cockload Andy. Okay, I'm trying to give a sort of non-biased take. If I'm in the jury right now, I feel like what she's saying kind of makes sense, but in the timeline.
No. Dr.
Be
Curry also testified
manipulated.
that the victim of PTSD has to effectively be prone
In the
and be able to
timeline,
function at all.
it definitely
Would
could
you
be
agree
manipulated
with
with it.
Objection misstates the evidence.
She said they couldn't hike, they couldn't move, they couldn't function in any shape, way, shape, or
overrule the
form.
objection.
Thank you.
No, that is not correct. That is often actually a myth and misconception about individuals who were struggling with PTSD or trauma-based disorders, and I'm often called to answer that and speak to that. People who are struggling with trauma and PTSD are very strong, courageous, resilient people, even though that they're struggling. They get up, they have to go to work and drop their kid off at school and go to the market, even though they're struggling with these symptoms. So I often talk about it as this sort of walking around with a 50-pound bag of flour on their backs, just sort of trying to get through the day, where sometimes that button's going to press play and the trauma's going to start activating in their head.
Trigger,
and then they're
yeah.
going to be having to think about it and have startle and have physiological reactions until they can find a way to hit that pause and shut it off
I don't see
again.
how that's relevant
So they
here.
still have, impairments in other ways, but they go about their lives. They're not, totally debilitated. If you have someone in that high range, the highest score is
She's
an 80
correct.
on the CAPS. Ms. Hurd had a 28.
Well, of
If you have
course, she's an
someone in
expert,
the
but
higher
still.
range, we have seen people who are, severely disabled because of it, but that's not the norm of people who have this moderate PTSD.
And did you find functional impairment with Amber?
Yes, I did.
But she
Now,
picks and
Dr. Curry also said that it is not within the scope of a psychologist to evaluate domestic violence. Do you agree with that?
it seems like Amber's very
Of
picky
course
and
I don't agree
and
with that.
choosy.
This is what I do for a living, day in, day
Oh,
out.
I
for
treat this like
25
this and
years.
this like that and this like that.
We are specifically trained to understand the profound impact that trauma has on people's lives.
but
That's
is-
what we do in the trauma
Yeah.
division of the American Psychological Association. We disseminate that knowledge. And domestic violence is one of those profound traumas. Domestic violence is part of state licensing boards, that you can't get licensed in some states unless you take training on domestic violence. You can't renew your license unless you get training on domestic violence. So people who have, specialized training in this area, it is, beholden upon them to accurately assess for intimate partner violence and sexual violence. And it's more important to assess for the sort of scientific understanding of what domestic violence is. So you have to assess for the physical violence, the psychological violence, the surveillance, the economic, the emotional abuse, and the sexual violence. That is not gratuitous. That is
Objection.
understanding.
Narrative.
All right.
No, let her narrate. They have what about
Now,
20 minutes
Dr.
left?
Curry suggested that you made a determination just based on personal opinion and just on checklists and a couple of tests that you misinterpreted. Would you agree with that?
I
Yeah, I got it
vehemently
upstairs, Eddie.
disagree with that. As I stated to you, over 29
Okay, let her-
hours and 12 psychological tests and reviewing a slew of documents in this case, most importantly, therapy records and interviews, collateral interviews with therapists, using all that data. That is what a solid forensic methodological exam looks like. And then I made my conclusions based on my clinical education, knowledge, and training to come up with a professional expert opinion.
Okay. And just to remind, to make
Shish.
sure we're reminded here, you were qualified in this court, in this case, as an expert in forensic psychology, specifically in domestic violence and in no, I just lost it. And in violence, correct? Intimate, and in trauma, correct?
But I believe
Objection,
it-
Your Honor, misstates the record.
Yeah. If you want to ask the question again.
Yeah,
She was already submitted. Why is she asking you this again?
You were qualified.
She was submitted and accepted it without objection or without
You were
yeah.
qualified as an expert in forensic psychology with a specialty in domestic violence and in trauma, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that was in this case.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, do you still hold the same opinions you did that you gave the jury earlier?
Yes, I do.
And do you still hold them within a reasonable degree of psychological probability and certainty?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
All right. Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, but can we approach quickly?
Sure.
Phew. Okay. How long did she spend studying here, whatever? And not that I want to dismiss, online whatever, but it seemed like it was like 29 hours, right? Was it 5 or 29? I don't remember. And was that last year or 4 years ago, 5 years ago? I don't remember exactly. It was in 2021. That's a game changer. It is a major game changer. Things change. The landscape changes. Everything changes. It's not even close to the same. Your subject is not in that very environment that they were in 5 years ago.
Good morning, Dr. Hughes.
Good morning, Mr. Dennison.
The last time you were here, I believed that you testified that you had diagnosed Ms. Heard with PTSD before you gave the gold standard CAPS-5 test.
That's correct.
Right. And that diagnosis is actually reflected in the first of the disclosures you put forward in this case.
I believe the first disclosure was February 2021, and at that point I had done 11 psychological tests. That's correct.
Right. And your disclosure reads, Ms. Heard's responses on the PCL-5 support a DSM-5 diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder with an etiology of intimate partner violence she experienced by a former partner. Remember writing that?
That's correct.
Okay. You just testified that you need to read the manual, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we put up 1311 as a demonstrative?
Uh-oh. He's playing Clash Royale, but I can't stand him. He's like 2K fucking trophies.
Any objection to
I don't know what
1311?
it is.
Johnny is garbage.
All right, if you want to
May we
leave,
approach?
you want to approach?
Tom,
Really? He's not 8K. What are you talking about? What? Yeah, he was caught by TMZ stealing one of his cars to buy fucking gems. What about it? They paid to win Andy. I, for myself, I've never put a single gem in the fucking game. I'm a non-pay to win Andy.
Thank you.
I don't see this in the
Mad?
document either.
They're getting the right one up.
yeah, we got it up. Let's use 1312.
1312, okay. And that, any objection to that demonstrative?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, 1312 can be published to the jury.
Dr. Hughes.
Oh my God.
Do you recognize what the National Center for PTSD is?
What it is?
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And they publish the PTSD checklist for DSM-5,
That's correct.
that what we've been calling the PCL-5.
Correct.
All right. And are you familiar with the document that's on your screen?
Yes.
All right. What is it?
It's the instruction manual to how to administer the PCL-5.
Okay. I'd like to move for the admission of 1312.
Oh,
Any objection to 1312 coming into evidence? All right, 1312 and evidence.
is he gonna quote her saying,
Can we go to the
read the
second
book?
page?
He's gonna quote her saying, read the book, and then it's wrong. It's not correct in the book.
Can we blow up the second paragraph on the right?
Oh, here it comes.
That's the PCL-5 should not be used as a standalone diagnostic tool. When considering a diagnosis, the clinician will still need to use clinical interviewing skills and a recommended structured interview, e.g., the CAPS-5, to determine a diagnosis. Correct? That's what the manual says.
Right, and this manual
Okay.
also says that this is a screening instrument, so when you do the clinical interviewing, you absolutely can determine diagnosis
So the
after
answer is
somebody.
yes. The manual says you
Motion is striking,
Still
The
need to use
PCL5.
clinical interviewing
Motion is
skills,
striking?
which I used.
right?
let me finish my question.
Strike after
The PCL5 should not be used as a standalone diagnostic tool, and they recommend using the CAPS-5 to determine a diagnosis, correct?
It does say that, yes.
Yeah, and you made your diagnosis before you did the CAPS-5.
I made my diagnosis doing clinical interviewing and 11 other psychological tests that supported diagnosis of PTSD and symptomatology consistent with PTSD.
Okay.
Whatever that is.
You said that we should read the manual. Would you also agree with me that we need to read the directions on these tests?
Sure.
Okay. Tom, can you pull up 1309 as a demonstrative?
Jesus. Goofy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any objection of 1309 as a demonstrative?
Christ, come on, lady. She always does that shit. She always does that. Hmm?
1309 and post the jury as demonstrative.
Doctor, do you recognize the demonstrative that's in front of you?
Yes, but I didn't put the red lines on that.
No, I did.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
Funny. Haha, funny, dude.
So, this, what do you recognize this as?
I recognize that we previously discussed this, and I told you that I oriented Ms. Hurd to a different time frame because she was already out of the relationship.
Okay, maybe we should back it up a little. This is the CTS-2 that you administered as part of this battery of tests that you indicate you did in relationship to your diagnosis.
Right, this is the conflict tactic scale too.
All right. And you'll agree with me that this test specifically asks, in front of every single question, how often did this happen in the past year?
Correct, and I
Right.
oriented
And
the
you
individual
know-
to not limit
ready,
herself
ready?
to the
Correct.
last year to get an accurate
Strike.
assessment of the violence and abuse that she experienced in the
Strike, move
relationship.
to strike.
Objection, Your Honor, move to strike.
Move to strike this bullshit. Shut
Strike
the
last
fuck
part
up.
of the answer. Strike the last part of the answer. Thank you. Next question.
Yeah. And you know that at the time that you gave this test to Ms. Hurd, she had been away from Mr. Depp for far longer than a year, correct?
Which is why I oriented her to a different
Yes or no,
time
ma'am?
frame in answering the questions.
Doctor, yes or no?
So, of course,
Okay, you knew she was gone for more than a year.
of course.
All right. Let's look at another one of these. You talked about the
Wait a minute.
You talked about the danger assessment test.
That's correct.
She's getting seared. Oh, she's going red. It's like a tomato. She's looking like like a little tomato.
What number is this?
Oh shit.
13 plaintiffs 1310.
Thank you.
Any objection to 1310 as a
No, Your Honor.
demonstrative? Okay. You publish to the jury.
Dr. Hughes, this is a blank form, but this is the danger assessment test that you also gave.
Here comes
to
the
Ms.
lines.
Hurd, correct?
Here come the red lines.
I didn't give it to her. I filled it out based on the data that was provided to me.
So you asked her the questions and then you filled it in.
It was somewhat collaborative.
Okay.
What?
Can we blow up the second full paragraph?
She filled it out for her.
It says, using the calendar, please mark the approximate dates during the past year when you were abused by your partner or ex-partner. You didn't use any calendar, did you?
I did not use a calendar because she was already out of the relationship. As I said, these are static risk factors, so they don't change. So
But
I
these
orient her to
exams-
the time of the relationship.
Ma'am, it's fair to say that this examination that you gave specifically indicates that you were supposed to look over the past year. And that's not the language?
No, that's one administration. People use this instrument for if you're in an acute situation in a relationship, trying to get a better assessment of the current behaviors. We can use it retrospectively, like I just stated, and in homicides and looking back about what are the serious risk factors that were in
she
this
said read the
relationship.
book.
I didn't ask you about anything other than, don't the instructions limit this test to the previous year?
You can give this test not only on the previous
Nope, asking
year,
you about the instructions.
but I'm telling you how the test is administered in clinical practice and in
And-
forensic
and-
practice.
Oh, in practice,
Opposing
okay.
counsel can come up and ask questions about it. I'm asking you about the instructions. And the instructions say, look over the past year.
Yeah, on this, yes, that it says that.
And you had actual knowledge when you gave the test that Mr. Depp was gone way more than a year before this test.
That is correct.
Right. All right. Let's look at more instructions.
No, ask why she filled it out for her.
1247, which is already in evidence.
Why did you fill it out for her?
Dr. Hughes, you recognize this one too, right?
Yes,
Can't? Why not?
All right. This is what everybody calls the CAPS 5.
correct.
All right. Can we go to the first page? Let's blow up the
It's
instructions.
fine. It's normal. But it says you. Okay, whatever. Oh, doctor used.
Standard administration and scoring of the CAPS 5 are essential for producing reliable and valid scores and diagnostic decisions. Correct?
Oh, they did it together.
Correct.
I get it.
And you know you have to do this in a standardized way because it is the first instruction, correct?
Correct.
Can we go to the next page? One more. Oh, wait. That's good. This is a page on scoring, and we talked about this last time.
Yes.
You score these tests by frequency and intensity.
Correct.
Uh-oh.
And you'll remember that in every single instance that you were asked to fill in the blank about frequency, you failed to do so, correct?
That's not correct.
Oh, you filled in any blank on this form with respect to frequency?
I filled in the frequency on the side of the caps where I am actually scoring the caps.
No, I
Where
asked
it's
you whether
relevant.
you filled in a single blank on this form with respect to frequency. Is the answer to that yes or no?
I don't know what you mean, a single blank.
All right, let's keep going.
Oh my god, audio
All right,
guy, please, please, man.
We'll stay at this page for a second. This is the very first box you're asked to fill in as to, I think, a fairly fundamental question, right? What happened?
We talked about this before, Mr. Dennison. I had 88 pages of notes of what happened. It would have been redundant to put it there.
You know that you are obligated to produce this test in a way that other people can meaningfully review them. Yes?
The people in this case who are meaningfully reviewing them have my 88 pages of notes.
Right. But you chose to put absolutely nothing in the box, the standardized box, that said what happened.
You don't have to put it in the box if you have it somewhere else. It's not
Because
a,
this
if
is
it's
not a
not a
standardized test.
Life
If it's
threat,
not
yes.
a research
Seriously, yes.
instrument that
yes.
is used
What
for
happened?
research, if you're using it for a clinical diagnostic purpose, no, you don't. If you have that data elsewhere.
Okay. Let's go another page or so.
It seems like she just does as she pleases. She just glides through the rules and and do the instructions. Yet she says that the people read the manual, do the instructions. Good one. So ironic.
All right, let's look at item 4B4. And I asked you, you filled in the blank about frequency. And there's a blank in many of these items that asks number of times. You didn't fill a single one of them in, did you?
Right, because I filled them on the right side of the instrument where I am scoring it.
And that is the way that you believe that you followed the instructions of a standardized test.
Yes, correct.
No further questions.
All right, redirect.
Very briefly. You used the term static risk factor. What did you mean by that?
Static risk factors are risk factors that don't change. It's maybe if you smoke cigarettes, you may have a risk of lung cancer, right? That's a factor that doesn't change. You can look forward if someone's smoking, you can look past if someone's smoking. So these lethality risk factors are present whether you're evaluating them in the last year or 5 years ago.
And when you're trying to assess for trauma related to the interpersonal violence that we discussed,
I've upgraded it.
why is it important to get a time frame in which the relationship was in existence?
Well, you want to see the amount of trauma that the person experienced. The longer that they're in a relationship, you have more successive trauma. And one of the things that we know from the research is more trauma is not better. So the more successive traumas that you have, the greater likelihood that somebody's going to have psychological consequences and symptomatology as a result.
And therefore you need to get it within the relationship.
Objection leading.
And so how does that relate to needing to get the time frame in the relationship?
Well, you need to understand when you're trying to evaluate the impact of something, you have to understand what happened to the person. And that's sort of the core and the basis of trauma-informed care and of trauma diagnoses. You have to understand, the traumatic event and how it transpired and how it played out for that individual so that you can better assess for the symptomatology that's falling from it.
Thank you.
You said you had 88 pages of notes. What were in your 88? And without going into the specifics, can you just describe what was included in the 88 pages of notes?
In the 88 pages were many of the documented incidents of intimate partner
Objection, Your
violence.
Honor.
She's just describing it. That came up. He said you didn't fill those in the boxes. She said it was in my 88 pages. I'm just saying what was in your 88 pages. I'm not asking her to give each of the specific events. She can describe the summary of it.
Can we come up?
Okay.
Chat, anybody's got a timer? They're back against the fucking wall right now. So what happens then when they're out of time? If they ask questions that are kind of dumb fuck questions, right? That can be clarified, they can't clarify it with cross. That's it. They just get.
What is the difference between clinical scoring and clinical evaluation and research evaluation with respect to the CAPS-5 and the other tests?
Objection compound.
Sustained.
Your Honor, when it's compounded, it's because it might be confusing to the jury.
Good. Sustained. Next question.
Okay.
Damn,
Can you
busted.
explain to the jury what the difference is between clinical scoring and evaluation on a test and research?
Objection, Your Honor, compound.
Compound. I mean, yeah.
Overruled. Good.
Oh wow.
Sure.
Okay.
So the PCL and the CAPS-5 are frequently used in research. And when they're used in research, that means the document stands alone.
Same
They don't
question.
have 88 pages of notes to help understand the background of the trauma and what the person has experienced. And why those boxes may be relevant in research is because back in the day when I was a research assistant, I had to input that into the computer. And then they would maybe look at some of that data for the research study. So that becomes very important in research.
All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hughes. You can have a
Thank
seat in
you.
the courtroom or you're free to go.
Oh,
Thank you
she's
very much.
mauled.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and
Jesus.
take our afternoon recess.
She's
morning recess.
schmalded.
Let's take our 15-minute recess. Do not discuss.
Oh my
our case
God,
with
somebody
anybody
get us some
and
air,
don't do any
man.
outside research, okay?
actually schmelting.
All right, why don't we just come back at 11:05 then? All right,
you.
excellent.
That's 21 minutes. Okay, guys, I want to watch some of this stuff that happened yesterday. I missed it. Nah, no Clash Royale. We'll post something later.
That really don't matter all that much. What would matter is, for example, if you're taking notes, the focal length would be important.
Hey guys, we saw the TMZ already.
The pattern of metering, things like that to a photographer would be important. And again, this is just a few lines, and the reason I put these in there was just to explain a bit what EXIF data is. The actual thing I'm trying to point out is the fact that instead of an operating system, it shows the editing program that was used on this photo.
Are there additional photos that you did this analysis for?
Yes, many.
Okay. Can we scroll to the next page, please, Tom? Is there anything about this photo that you noted as part of your analysis, Mr. Neumeister?
Yes, again, it's you know, right there, you've got Photos 3.0 on that particular photo. And I think, you know, we've pretty much covered what the stuff is, but again, you see the Photos 3.0.
So basically, what happened is that she doctored the pictures locally or on the device itself through the fucking app, right? Where you do the little like light thing and you modify the things or whatever. And then it synced all devices or whatnot, right? Or the other one spread, doesn't matter which versions of it, right? So you had a bunch of versions, plus one that's doctored. And what I'm trying to say is that the 3.0 is just the basic software of posting and editing. And the multiple pictures, it's because it's spread on all devices. When you take these individual statements, it makes sense, but in context, it doesn't, I mean, it's pretty incriminating.
And again, this could not come out of an iPhone this way. This would go into a computer, be edited and rendered through the photo editor. And this would then be embedded in the EXIF data.
Do you have other photos in this demonstrative?
Yes.
All right, can we scroll to the next page?
Same thing. You've got up here in the top, you've got the Photos 3.0, and this is throughout a lot of the photos that are in evidence, or versions of the photos in evidence, were gone through Photos 3.0 or Photos 1.5, an earlier version.
Can we scroll to the next page, please, Tom? And what about this one?
Same thing, Photos 3.0. And again, in a photo editing app, you can do an awful lot of things. So when you see Photos 3.0, first of all, you know it's not anywhere near an original. There's going to be compression artifacts because it's a JPEG file.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Can we move
Guys,
on to the next page? Of
Chat
this,
is a Gambo. They're
demonstrative,
just using
please?
the emote Gambo. It's an emote now.
And
Look.
again, same thing. You've got the Photos app.
Okay. And I believe there's one final photo in this demonstrative. What about this one?
Download 7TV.
Again, if you look up there, it says Photos 3.0 on that particular photo.
All right, we can take that one down. Your Honor, I have a little bit left. I don't know if you wanted to.
All right, you want to take our afternoon? Let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess.
Okay, what else did I miss that was very important? Guys, what even is this?
My name is Ben Chu from the firm of Brown Rudnick. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Kate Moss,
Ms. Moss, where do you reside?
London, England.
From where are you testifying today, Ms. Moss?
Gloucestershire, England.
Ms. Moss, do you know Johnny Depp?
In it.
Yes, I do.
How do you know Mr. Depp?
I had a relationship with him.
Did there come a time when you and Mr. Depp had a romantic relationship?
Yes.
For how long, Ms. Moss, were you and Mr. Depp a romantic couple?
From 1993 to 1994 to 1998.
Ms. Moss, did there come a time when you, while you and Mr. Depp were a couple, that the two of you took a vacation together to the Golden Eye Resort in Jamaica?
Yes.
What, if anything, happened when you were in Jamaica with Mr. Depp?
We were leaving the room, and Johnny left the room before I did, and there had been a rainstorm, and as I left the room, I slid down the stairs.
The room.
And I hurt my back.
How did you...
And
I apologize, Ms. Moss. Please continue.
and I screamed because I was in because I didn't know what had happened to me and I was in pain, and he came running back to help me and carried me to my room and got me medical attention.
Oh,
Did Mr. Depp push you in any way down the stairs?
Jesus.
No,
During the course of your relationship, did he ever push you down any stairs?
no, he never pushed me, kicked me, or threw me down any stairs.
Ms. Moss, have you ever before today testified in any kind of court proceeding?
No, I have never.
Why did you decide to testify today?
Objection, Your Honor.
All right.
That's beyond the scope of what we just talked about.
Oh, get mad.
Thank you, Ms. Moss. We have nothing further at this time. We greatly appreciate your taking the time to testify.
All right. Any cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You're free to go. Thank you, Ms. Moss.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, surely, guys, and this is it's like the flat earthers. Everybody's lying at the same time. They're all coordinating this shit. It's all a coordinated scheme. They're pulling people from 10 years ago, dude, and they're all taking a side because fuck it, dude. That's why. Because fuck it. Okay. What else? That the Pokey thinks? No, she doesn't think that. It's just that. We didn't see Curry. We saw TMZ dude, which kind of went hard. What else? I mean, Curry is she's just very nice. I think she's very nice. I didn't eat yet. I'm gonna order some food.
To avenge wrongs.
Were there other results you believe Dr. Hughes to have misrepresented?
I don't know yet, but if I find out.
Whatever.
The TSI-2.
Yes. So Dr. Hughes generally said that testing supported PTSD and that there was an etiology for her trauma of intimate partner violence. She did reference that essentially I can't remember if she said that the trauma symptom inventory indicated PTSD, but she did say that the elevation on that validity scale is consistent with PTSD, and that's simply not true. That scale was designed and has been tested and shown to be there to show when somebody is endorsing extremely unusual items that are not consistent with PTSD. And even though when some people are experiencing PTSD, their distress level is so high that they'll engage in what we call a cry for help, and they may sometimes exaggerate distress. Again, when you're looking at scores as high as Ms. Hurd's, and then you're not seeing indications of PTSD in the more subtle tests where she doesn't know what she's endorsing, it's good evidence that her over-endorsement on that one test is because of the reason
What are
the
these
scale was
faces
made
she's
to
making on the right
detect
side? Jesus Christ.
exaggeration and feigning of symptoms.
Is this the test that resulted in the 98th percentile
Yes.
score?
Yes, on that atypical response scale.
And what does that 98th percentile score represent?
So that 98th percentile
I
score
might
just
just get myself
represents
checked in.
that among 98% of people who take that test would not have endorsed. She scored more of those unusual items that are not
I got
consistent with
problems.
PTSD than 98% of people who have ever taken that test.
Does that relate to this concept you talked about before called feigning?
Yes.
What is feigning again?
Well, feigning is essentially exaggerating symptoms.
No, I think I just got
of a
one more
disorder.
problem.
I think the third thing you indicated you were going to talk about was self-reports and personal opinion as facts. What are you talking about there?
So in any science and in psychology specifically, it's really important that we use precise language and we say what we mean and we do not present.
Guys, I have a question to chat. Guys, girls that are in chat, is this the type of hair that is this like all like whatever, or if you touch it, is it solid? It's solid, right? They probably put some spray in and it's stuck in place, is it not? This shouldn't
Language
be
and we
moving.
say what we mean and we do not present opinions as facts, because when you are in the role of an expert witness or an expert in any setting,
Thank you much,
essentially
thank
a
you, Mag.
layperson may not be able to detect the difference between something that is a personal opinion that you're giving versus something that is substantiated by research data, test data, reliable test methods. So our ethics talk about, especially the specialty guidelines of forensic psychology, the responsibility we have to distinguish between data, then inferences we're making from that data, what the data can mean, sort of like those tables I do. I put the data, the inferences based on the research, and then what my ultimate opinion is, integrating all of that data. And it's very important that we clarify that to the fact finder, to the judge, the jury. That's our responsibility, that we do not clothe personal opinions or the self-report of an examinee as an expert fact or somehow scientifically based when it is just a personal opinion or self-report of an examinee.
What do you mean by self-report?
The self-report is essentially what the examinee tells you during the interview.
Okay. When did Dr. Hughes do this most?
She did this most when describing
Mosquito bite
instances of
or
alleged
spider.
IPV. And there's also an issue there because one of our ethics also discusses the importance of relevance and withholding, essentially constraining our testimony to the data and not including private information, personal information that unnecessarily compromises the dignity of any of the litigants. She provided a lot of
was there any other juicer that happened or not? Oh, there you go.
Plaintiff's 1305 and use this demonstrative. You can publish to the jury.
Oh, see this part. There's the GIF.
And Mr. Neumeister, what's your, what do we see here in this demonstrative?
There's Exhibit 712, I believe.
Wow.
I'm not sure the date's number, 712 and 713. They're two separate exhibits, except it's the exact same photograph that's been, one's been edited, one hasn't. Or I can't say that one hasn't, but the colors have been modified in an editor.
Objection, Your Honor. Beyond the scope of your ruling, talking about colors. It keeps happening.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Neumeister, did you form an opinion in this case about the authenticity of the photos?
They're mauled. You're not a color expert or artist from Harvard. You cannot speak about colors. The colors are different. Okay, who are you then? A professional observer? You don't get to say that.
You reviewed of Ms. Heard?
Well, first of all, nobody can identify the authenticity of the photos, of any of the photos. Marked.
Oh yeah, we saw Cross. He
Photos
smoked
one,
them
or
on a
just marked
stack.
with the operating system number. And the reason is the manner of collection. So these came from an iTunes backup. Now, what is an iTunes backup?
Objection, Your Honor. I'm sorry. You're beyond the scope of your ruling. EXIF metadata. This keeps happening.
Your Honor, may I approach on this one?
Oh my God, please.
Without going into the specifics, what's your opinion about the authenticity of the photos you received from Ms. Heard?
Based on the way they were collected, there would be
Objection, Your Honor. We just ruled on this.
I framed my question, I thought, Your Honor, to avoid the issue that you're concerned about. Mr. Neumeister, what's your opinion about the authenticity here?
There's no way for any forensic expert to validate any of these photos.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Neumeister.
Good afternoon.
And President, he says that, but the other guy says that they're all validated. From my opinion and my perspective, it's all validated. This guy has it right. You cannot, in any capacity, verify the validity of the pictures. That's just how it is.
Your only degree,
and the other guy should know this.
Science, correct?
He's an expert. He should know
42
that.
years ago, correct.
And you have no degree whatsoever from any academic institution in computer science, correct?
That's correct.
You cannot.
And you have no certifications in computer forensics, correct?
That's correct.
From the opinions you've testified today, you relied on
What
no
else?
data except for the embedded EXIF metadata to support those opinions, correct?
Incorrect.
What other data did you rely on for the opinions you've testified to today?
I was trying to explain that you kept it.
What other data did you rely on for the actual opinions you've been able to testify to today besides EXIF metadata?
The type of extraction that was performed? You're asking the question.
For the actual opinions you testified to?
That is what I would use. I would also use vector scopes.
Objection, Your Honor. That was not responsive to my question, Your Honor.
If you want to approach.
Is he gonna start crying? Is this the part where he starts crying, or what? Oh my God! Like, please, man. Jesus, this guy. Yeah, but Your Honor, he wasn't like. Come on, man.
And
Give it a little bit of juice, man.
Whitey stuff is cocaine,
I would say.
and the e-business is ecstasy. You already
Yeah,
said
quite
so.
likely, yes.
Okay.
So I
take that.
didn't recall that.
Chad, it's gonna
but,
start soon,
Pull up
right?
Exhibit 1817, please.
2 minutes.
This is a picture that you were shown this morning, Mr. Depp.
Yes, sir.
And you kind of made some illustrations on the picture and gave your account of what you see here. Mr. Depp, you testified previously that the vodka bottle that you allege cut off your finger was a handle of vodka, correct?
Yes.
You've already testified
The
to that,
second
correct?
bottle, there was a handle on that bottle,
Right.
yes.
This bottle, whatever it is, to the extent it's glass at all, that's in the corner of this room, that's not a handle of vodka.
Objection calls for speculation.
I think you'll find that I said 2 bottles.
Well, actually, what you testified to this morning, Mr. Depp, was that the bottle in the corner was the handle, and there is no other bottle in the picture, is there?
No, that's not what I testified. I testified that, may I touch the screen?
Yes.
This
Touch it.
is glass.
Touch it.
This is glass.
Yep. And that's not a handle. Neither of those are handles of vodka.
It's that big, it's broken. The handles up the top on those vodka bottles, sir.
Yeah.
I mean,
And none, if you combine all that glass on the floor, that doesn't make up the amount of glass in a handle of vodka, does it?
Objection
What?
calls for speculation.
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay. That is just zero head.
Okay. Hold on.
That is
I'll
actually
sustain
a
objection. Next
zero head,
There's
Andy.
no picture of a handle of vodka broken on that floor, is there, Mr. Depp?
No, I don't see it. I see glass under this chair here.
Okay. Well, you testified this morning that you did see it, so it's good to get that clarification. Let's move
No, I
on.
didn't say I saw a handle.
You also testified this morning that yeah, and I want to get this. I want to make sure that we're on the same page here. You
I don't think we will
testified
be.
earlier this morning.
6 minutes. What? It's gonna restart. Wait, I will watch after.